Hello, my name's Brett Grellier from BGPS. BGPS provides services for people who've experienced homelessness and for the services that support those people. One of the things that we provide is a therapy service for clients working with ScotsCare, who provide a range of services for people who've found themselves homeless in London. And colleagues at ScotsCare have asked me to describe a little bit about anxiety and provide a couple of tips that we can all use for this brief video. So first of all, to talk about anxiety, we can think about anxiety as the felt sense of our body's natural response to threat. So that feeling of adrenaline and cortisol running through the body, where we start to feel trembly, our heart is racing, we might get sweaty and our breathing becomes shallow. So this is a normal response to threat. It's providing us with the energy for either a fight response, a flight response, or to freeze in response to threat. The problem is for us humans is that we're able to reflect on our experience. So we have thinking brains as well as these instinctive brains that get us ready for avoiding danger, avoiding threat. And so that means that what can happen is our tricky brains can misinterpret the threat response and actually exacerbate it. So for example, in panic attacks, we may feel our heart racing and our minds tell us, oh, I'm having a heart attack. And that can refuel the threat system when we get caught into unhelpful loops. So that's one of the first things to be aware of, is the way that our thinking brain can get us caught into unhelpful loops with our instinctive threat-focused brain. Something else that's useful to be aware of is that our bodies and brains have developed for a very different kind of environment than the one we live in now. So for 99.5% of the time that humans have been living on the earth, which is about 1.9 million years, we've been hunter-gatherers. And so our threat response has developed to survive the dangers faced by hunter-gatherers rather than the modern environments that we live in now. So the main kind of dangers that hunter-gatherers would have faced would have been neighbouring tribes or animals that may have come and harmed the tribe. So in the modern world, our threat systems can get activated by all sorts of things which aren't really an immediate threat to us. So the sound of sirens, for example, or in particular the feeling that we don't fit into the group or that we've done something to transgress tribe rules. Or even that we feel that people that we're around don't fit with our tribe. So all of these kind of responses all of these stimulus from the modern world can create a threat response when really there is no danger. And we are particularly attuned to social threat. So when we were all living in small tribes of around 100 people, transgressing tribe rules, for example, taking more than our share or doing something that brought shame upon the group, would have eventually led either to us being cast out of the group or serious consequences within the group. And so what happens in the modern world, advertising, for example, or social media can make us feel like we don't belong to the group, which then creates a threat response, when really this isn't a direct threat to our survival. So what can be helpful is to think of these responses as a false alarm. So that's the first thing to do when we feel an anxiety response, is to ask ourselves, am I really in immediate, direct, mortal danger? And if we're not, the first thing we can do is reassure our threat system, this doesn't feel good, but I'm not actually in danger. Everything is okay. So rather than using our thinking brain to cause these unhelpful loops, we're using our thinking brain to calm and soothe our threat system. Okay, I feel anxious, but I'm not in immediate danger. So the next thing we need to do then is to slow down our physiological system. So slow down the threat response, the fight-flight response that our body naturally and instinctively goes into when we perceive danger. And so there is a couple of tips that I would like to share with you today. The first one is to regulate our breathing. So when our threat system is activated, our parasympathetic nervous system is in charge. And this creates the symptoms of slow, shallow breathing, of the heart racing, of feeling shaky and maybe sweaty. So by slowing down our breath, what we can actually do is to stimulate our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the system that kicks in when the danger is over. And so the two ways of doing this, one is to slow down the breath. So we want to take slow, deep breaths, and ideally to slow our system down, we want to ensure that out breaths are longer than the in breaths. So we may breathe in for a count of 4 and then breathe out for a count of 6. And if we do this 2 or 3 times, then we begin to slow down our threat system. The second thing we can do is to take a drink of water or a cup of tea, whatever's handy, because by activating our digestive system, we're also telling our threat system there's nothing to be scared of. If there was really a saber-toothed tiger chasing you, you wouldn't be about to eat a piece of cake or drink a cup of tea. So the threat system is deactivated by activating our digestive system. The second and last tip I would like to share with you today is what's known as the 5-4-3-2-1 method. And so what the threat system does is narrow our focus onto the perceived threat. So if there's a saber-toothed tiger following us in the jungle, we're going to keep our eye on that saber-toothed tiger every second to avoid the saber-toothed tiger getting us. And so the same thing happens if we feel that we're under threat by something in the environment. We will narrow our focus onto that, whether it's a thought we've had in our mind, someone we feel doesn't like us, or something that's happening in the environment around us, like the sound of sirens. So a very helpful and effective way of reducing our threat response is to broaden our awareness. So we broaden our awareness by, first of all, noticing 5 things we can see in the environment. And it's really helpful if we do this in a really slow way. Just acknowledge 5 things that catch our attention. And once we've seen those 5 things, we then focus on 4 things that we can sense through our touch. So it might be the fabrics of the clothes that you're wearing, it might be the surface that you're sitting on, or something in nature that you can touch. So we notice 5 things we can see, 4 things we can touch, and then what we want to do next is to notice 3 things we can hear. And sometimes it's helpful to close our eyes before doing that and notice 3 sounds that we can hear in our environment. The next thing we want to do is to notice 2 things we can smell. So again, it might be helpful to close your eyes to notice 2 pleasant smells or fragrances in the environment. And then the final thing is to notice 1 thing you can taste, which might be the last thing you ate, or coffee or tea, or whatever it is that you were last digesting. So this is all I want to say for today, and hopefully those 2 tips will be useful. And I'd also like to acknowledge Paul Gilbert and the compassion-focused therapy approach, which has really helped to bring this knowledge of the way our tricky brains work into the mainstream, so that we can all use this to help manage our anxiety in everyday life. Thank you very much, and thank you ScotsCare for inviting me to deliver this video.